Okay, I believe we're live. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, and welcome to another Spider Strategies monthly training webinar. This month of October 2018, we'll be covering using Kpi as template on organizations and KPI measure roll-ups within Scoreboard. My name is Tom Keating. I'm your presenter today. I'm a training and customer experience consultant here at Spider Strategies. And before we jump into this session, I just want to, invite you at any point in time, if you'd like to talk with me about training or your customer experience, to contact me at tom.keating@spiderstrategies.com. Before jumping into our actual content for the day, just a couple of basic webinar logistics I'd like to share with you. First of all, this webinar is being recorded for your future use and reference. All you attendees are presently muted. I always, in these monthly webinars, apologize for in advance muting you. I actually would love if these sessions could be more of a mutual conversation rather than just a monologue and presentation from me. But we've learned from experience that if we don't mute the participants, we almost inevitably end up with some kind of undesired background noise and confusion. But with that said, either during this session or, of course, after the session, again, I invite you to send any questions or communications or comments or anything, again, to either me personally at tom.keating@spiderstrategies.com or our education email at learn@spiderstrategies.com. So let's get into a discussion and a preview of today's agenda. We're going to start with a basic introduction to the idea of Kpi as a template as compared to copy. And I use the term here versus copy. They're not diametrically opposed to each other. They're just different things. And we just want to make sure that you conceptually understand what Kpi as a template does versus what copy does. We'll also give you a kind of an academic introduction to the idea of roll-up aggregation properties on any of your KPI metrics within Scoreboard. Then we'll move into a demonstration of both the Kpi as template and employing roll-up settings at work in a real-world, Scoreboard environment. That'll probably take up the majority of the session here today. And then we'll wrap things up with just a brief discussion on expanding on a Kpi as a template organization they may have created, and just some final considerations in terms of using Kpi as template organizations. So starting with our introduction to the idea of Kpi as template versus copy. Let's first just address what a copy does within Scoreboard. If you copy an organization, what you're doing again is you're focusing on a full-on organization within Scoreboard and its underlying scorecard structure, any dashboards, and any charts and reports that exist within that organization. So in this case, imagine organization A. If we make a copy of organization A, we get an exact snapshot in time copy of organization A, which you can then, of course, rename to be, for instance, organization B. Again, the scorecard structure, the dashboards, the charts and reports are all replicated. But what's very important for you to understand about the copy process is you end up with a new organization that will not reflect any potential future changes to the original organization. So again, it's very much a snapshot in time of the original organization. Changes to the original will not be reflected in the copy. And in a lot of cases, that's perfect. It's exactly what you want. You just need a jumping off point to create a brand new organization that should be completely independent of the original organization. Then let's move on to the discussion of Kpi as template. In Kpi as template, again, you're starting with, copying an organization. Again, all of its underlying scorecards, dashboards, charts, and reports, and you're making a copy of it. Again, it's going to be an exact copy. It is a little more customizable in that you can name it while you're creating it, and if desired, you can add some additional prefix or suffix kind of qualifiers to the name of elements that exist under the new Kpi as template organization. And what's really key here is that there always remains an ongoing parent and child connection from the original organization to the newly copied as template organization, such that any future changes to the original organization, in this case A, will be reflected automatically and across the board in organization B. And again, that's really desirable in a lot of big company situations where you have a general organization structure that you just want to not only replicate, but also if you make changes to the original, you want the changes to be reflected in all of the replications. So hopefully that concept of copy versus copy as template makes sense. So that's kind of the what. Let's just take a few minutes to look at a couple screen captures here to talk about the where. Where do you do this within Scoreboard? So you start within the organization structure. Far upper left, in this case, I've clicked on the sales briefcase for the sales organization, thus presenting me with all the organizations that presently exist. To get access to copy or copy as template, you need to jump into edit mode. So at the bottom of the black navigation pane, click on the edit button. That'll put you into edit mode. Once you're in edit mode, if you click on any given or existing organization, you'll get a simple 6-item, menu, pop-up menu that appears, and 2 of the elements of that in that pop-up menu are copy and copy as template. So first, let's just show you what a copy experience feels like. If you select copy, it's a simple one-screen interface where what you're doing is just defining where you want this copy to effectively live or be placed within your organization structure. So in this case, we would select, in this case, Mobile World Inc. is the, if you will, a parent kind of bucket for where we want the copy of customer support to live, and then we click Save in the lower right-hand corner, and that's it. So what it has done in that case is it took the customer support organization we had selected and it made an exact copy of it. And I won't bore you here at this point with lots more screen captures of everything that existed within customer support original now also exists in the new copy of customer support. We'll see that when I get into the live demo. However, or next, let's talk about the idea of copying as a template. So once again, I've clicked on the customer support organization on the left in the black navigation pane. In this case, you select copy as template. Again, a starting point is an interface that looks very much like what we just saw with the copy process, but note that there's a blue banner across the top indicating to you just what we talked about conceptually, that future changes to the original organization scorecards, dashboards, and reports will affect your new organization. Once again, you just select where you want this new organization to be placed, and then note at the bottom that this is a 2-step process. So this screen is the first of 2 steps of defining where the new copy as template organization should live, but then you click continue in the lower right-hand corner to move to the second step of the process, where you get the opportunity to provide a custom name for this new organization. In this case, I've given it kind of a long-winded name of Webinar Template Copy of Customer Support. Furthermore, you have the option, you don't have to do this, but if you'd like to uniquely identify the scorecard, the dashboards, and the reports that live within this new organization, you can provide either a prefix or a suffix that will be applied to all the names of everything that's coming across via this copy as template process. And then, of course, you click Save, and the end result is obviously a new organization called what we defined it to be, the Webinar Template Copy of Customer Support. And if we were to open up that newly created organization, we'll see that, at least in this case, what we're viewing here is the scorecard that came across via that copy as template. And note that the scorecard, the original organization had a scorecard called Customer Help Desk. In this case, the scorecard is Customer Help Desk -webinar. And the generic items under it all have -webinar, -webinar, and so on. Again, uniquely naming and identifying them. So that is just a quick introduction or overview of the idea of copy, the idea of copy as template, and where and how you achieve that within Scoreboard. With that covered, let's move on to a brief, again, sort of academic introduction to Rollup aggregation properties on KPIs within Scoreboard. First of all, sort of not only aware, but a conceptual overview here of where Rollup KPIs really come into play. And where they truly add value is if you have an organization structure that makes sense for your company or for your business, where you have a sense, like I'm presenting here, of a sales department that breaks down to, in this case, different world regions of US, Latin America, Australia, Africa, and so on. But then within the US region, you have divisions of West Coast and East Coast, and under them, you might have areas of Northwest, Southwest, Northeast, and Southeast. And that your desire is to have the exact same organization structure existing at all of those hierarchical tree structure levels, and that when you provide data to the child, the lowest child or leaf level organizations, in this case it would be Northwest, Southwest, Northeast, and Southeast, that those values in the scores would automatically know that they should roll up to West Coast, and that West Coast and East Coast should automatically roll up to US, and the US as well as Latin America, Australia, and all the other world regions would roll up to sales. And so a situation like this, a big company situation, is where the true value of roll-up KPIs come into play. Now, where roll-up KPIs are set is way down in the template itself. So all of this starts with the idea of a generic template that then gets replicated at lots of different hierarchical tree structure levels. So what I'm looking at here is the template. It's parentheses, sales template, parentheses, right? And within it, we've set up a scorecard with some generic areas and then some underlying KPIs. And in this screen capture, we're focusing on the new customers KPI. And if you get into a particular single KPI, hopefully you're already aware enough of KPIs and how they're set up. If you get into the series area, where you can define how and when an actual value will be provided for this particular KPI, and what the red flag and the goal values are for this particular, goal and red flag scoring type, there now exists in version 3.2 a roll-up setting. Okay, so if you set any of actual red flag or goal values to be roll-up, and in most cases, if you're going to roll up one of those three, you're probably going to select roll-up for all three, most likely. Not always necessarily always, but in most cases, you'll probably be rolling up your actual values. You'll also be rolling up your red flags and your goal values as well. So that is typically fairly consistent across those settings. Now, once a roll-up property has been set on any of those actual red flag or goal properties, above it, there is a roll-up aggregation type setting or property. Again, this is still all looking at the same new customers KPI. This roll-up aggregation type gives you three choices, either sum, average, or geometric mean. And this setting is going to be carried down and tell all of the different roll-ups for any of the different actual red flag or goals, how they should be rolled up as they're rolled up that tree structure hierarchy from, again, state to region to country or what have you, okay? So that roll-up aggregation type is important to know about. It doesn't even exist until you select roll-up as one of the series properties, but once you do, then it is available to you, and it dictates how the roll-up should occur through the hierarchy of the tree structure. Before we leave this idea of aggregation behind, a point that I've seen of a little bit of confusion is between roll-up aggregation type, what it does, and just to its left, manual aggregation type. This manual aggregation type does not impact directly the roll-up process. It doesn't impact how things are rolled up through the tree structure. What it always does for any KPI, whether you're employing roll-up or not, is dictate how, when you move, in this case, we're setting up this KPI as a monthly calendar. So this thing is going to be, expect values every month. But if we were to choose to view within the scorecard itself our performance at a quarterly level, the question is, how should the 3 monthly values be rolled up, or not rolled up, aggregated for the quarterly presentation of that KPI? So this manual aggregation type dictates how aggregation is performed, as you may, within your scorecard, change your calendar period selection. Okay, so those two, they do different things. They look the same, they have the same types of properties, but hopefully it's clear about where they impact and what effect they actually have. Okay, let's see. let's then, with that covered, so again, everything so far has been very screen captures and academics, and I hope this is all making sense to everybody. Again, I kind of wish I could ask you questions, but you're muted, so we'll just forge ahead into the next, step of our agenda, which is going to be a live demonstration within Scoreboard. So what we're going to do in this live demonstration is we'll take a few minutes just to review Mobile World and its existing structure, because that's the environment we're going to use for today's, educational demonstration. We'll create a copy of a base template organization, and then we'll create a copy as template of a base sales organization, and each of them will be for Europe. And the idea behind that is to show you the different results as you create just a copy, and then create a copy as template, and then make some changes and see what happens. And the changes we'll make is to add, within our base template, a new generic item, and set Rollup KPI in that base organization, and then just see what happens in each of our two different versions of copy, both copy and copy as template. Okay, so I'm going to fire up Scoreboard here, and just to give you a sense of, an original starting point, I always like to start demonstrations from the home page. In this case, when we're working with organizations, we're going to jump into the Scorecards section of Scoreboard, and then we'll go to the far upper left where you see Mobile World and the Mobile World briefcase, and we'll select it, and you see the drop down. Now, before I get into actually doing copying and copying as template, just want to review very quickly for anyone on the call today that might not be familiar with Mobile World and what it is. It's a sample sort of playground environment that we at Spider Strategies provide to you in any kind of touring or test demonstration environments that you may get. And if you're a new customer, we also set you up in your environment with Mobile World. The intention behind it is it's a representation of a large real world telecommunications company that is structured with, at the highest level, with a classic balanced scorecard paradigm of, a scorecard with perspectives like financial, customer, and so on, that have underlying objectives and feeder underlying measures or KPI metrics. So that's great. So that's at the corporate level. It is also comprised at the departmental level of several other different scorecards. So we have a scorecard for just the financial department of the Mobile World organization, which happens not to be structured in the classic balanced scorecard paradigm, but does a great job of just allowing the financial department in their scorecard to track things like revenue and cost of sales and so forth. Today, we're going to be leveraging the sales organization within Mobile World, because it's been set up in a way that just really behooves our discussion today, in that we have, as I showed you in the screen captures earlier, we have a sales department, we have some worldwide regions, US, Latin America, Australia, and Africa, and down here at the bottom, we have a sales template. I'm going to just show you quickly this sales template, because this thing is the organization that we set up with the intention of replicating throughout different world regions, different divisions, different areas. This is the thing that we're looking to replicate multiple times within our big company sales department. And this has been set up, I'll just expand this all, with a sales scorecard, a generic area or, a focus of value of sales, some underlying measures. In this case, sales revenue happens to be an aggregation of 3 underlying measures, a sales year-to-date measure, and so on. And I would ask you just to take, visual note and try and just remember this structure that I'm showing you here in the sales template. You'll also notice that this sales template is devoid of any colors or any values, and that's intentional. We basically created this template as just, again, a template. It's the thing that we're going to replicate, but we're not actually going to be populating this sales template with any actual values and expecting scores to be presented for the template itself, the base organization. But if we show you other world regions, such as if I go to Africa and click on Africa and select it, if we expand all, this scorecard within the Africa organization, and you see that there's a scorecard called Sales Africa, and under it is the exact same structure that we saw in our sales template. And again, it won't surprise you if I go to Australasia and open it up, and expand it, again, you'll see the exact same physical structure. And in this case, of course, our Australasia scorecard is being scored because we have provided actual values, and it's giving us, performance management visibility. And then if we just jump up to the US, just want to reflect here that, again, we have that hierarchical tree structure, the US being our largest market within the Mobile World organization. We've decided that it's appropriate to break it down into, divisions and areas of the country. And again, at every level, if we take a look at the scorecards here, you'll see the exact same structure in play. Okay? So that's just a very quick introduction to the structure of our sales organization here within Scoreboard at the present time. And our desire at this point is to reflect that Mobile World is moving into the European market. So we need a new organization for Europe. So to achieve that, what we'll do is first get into edit mode when looking at the organizations. We'll click on that original sales template organization. And first, let's just do a copy of it. Again, as we saw earlier, the copy interface is a simple one screen. And what I'll do is just navigate up into the if you will, the parent organization of sales. And we'll say that that's where we want this new copy to exist. So I'll click Save. And if we go back and take a look at our listing of organizations, I'll just do a quick refresh on the browser. And again, take a look at the listing of organizations within sales. You see now an exact replica of sales template down here at the bottom. And what I would like to do is rename that sales template to be Europe. So again, just to clarify, what I've done here is created, whoops, I clicked the wrong one. Sorry, folks. Sales template and rename. Okay, so we'll just call this one Europe as copy. And then we'll click rename. Now, that's great, and it exists. Now, what we also want to do, for example's sake, is create another copy, but this will be a copy as template. So again, I'll select sales template, and I'll do a copy as template. Again, the two-step process at play here. Again, in this case, we want this to live, if you will, in the same location under the sales parent organization. We'll click continue there. And in this case, we'll call this organization Europe as a template. We'll do template copy. Europe as a template copy. And as a suffix, we'd like to have space, opening parentheses, Europe behind everything in terms of scorecard elements. I'll do a quick copy and paste here. Scorecard elements, dashboard elements, and reports that exist within that template. Copy of our sales template. One thing I forgot to show you, folks, let me just do a quick save here. One thing I forgot to mention is when we were looking at the sales template organization, I'm going to get out of edit mode here. Sorry that I forgot to cover this. If I open up that sales template, I showed you the scorecard structure, but I neglected to show you that within this organization, we also have a collection of dashboards. Again, presently, they don't have any data because, as I said earlier, we're not populating our template with any actual values, but there are dashboards that exist, and there are charts and reports that exist, and they're ready to go. And again, for the organizations where we copied the sales template, like we'll just pick on Africa here as the most available one. If I look at the charts and reports, the same exact charts and reports are here, as well as the same dashboards are here. Okay? Sorry, I forgot to cover that earlier. All right, so we've created two new organizations, Europe as a copy, Europe as a template copy. And let's just take a look at each of those very quickly. And again, with regard to the dashboards, you see that the copy process gave me an exact replica of what we have existing in the sales template. 4 dashboards, 3 reports. If we look at the scorecard structure, sure enough, it's exactly like we saw within the sales template. Similarly, if we go to the Europe as a template copy, again, same idea, same scorecard structure, same 4 dashboards, same 3 charts and reports. So as of right now, physically, those 2 copies and copy as template are identical. Now, Where they will divert in terms of their performance going forward is if we change the sales template in any way. So we'll go into the sales template, and I'll ask you to work with me in the world of imagination, and imagine that at the Mobile World company, they've established a new sales initiative to sell discount cards. You know, discount cards that give you discounts at retailers and services. They figure that they make a lot of contact with the general population of the world. So let's, in addition to all the phones that we sell and communication programs that we sell, let's also try and sell some discount cards. So what we're going to do is add another generic item and a single KPI into this sales template organization within the sales scorecard. So I'll click a new scorecard item, and we'll set up a new, in the upper right, we'll create a generic item up here, or just kind of a folder for this, and we'll call this discount card sales, and click create. Then within the discount card sales newly created generic item, we want to add just a single KPI. We're going to keep it very simple today. So towards the upper right here, I'll set up a new, wait a minute, there we go, a new scorecard item in the upper right. Again, we'll set this up as a KPI, and we'll call this number of cards sold. Now, in setting this new KPI up, I know in advance that our US world region is structured hierarchically in a tree structure. So as I'm setting this up, I want to keep the idea of the roll-up aggregation in mind, and set this up so that it can have the best play and be the most applicable to that tree structure that is in that one single world region. So what I'll do is, just moving down in terms of setting up this new KPI, and again, hopefully all of you on the call have previous experience in setting up, you know, KPIs or measures originally. I'll select the default scoring type of goal and red flag. We will update this KPI monthly. Again, we're just tracking number of cards, so the data type of number is great. In terms of the aggregation type, we will leave it for now at sum, and you'll note that decimal precision and units are available to me. I'm just going to kind of slide past those settings and get down into the series area, where again, as I showed you in the screen capture presentation earlier, the choices here under actual value and red flag and goal are manual or calculated or roll up. And in this case, I'm going to select roll up. Note that as soon as I do that, as soon as I set roll up on even one of these series properties, just upper middle here, a new area or a new property has appeared called roll-up aggregation type that didn't used to be there. It basically pushed decimal precision and units kind of off to the right and down, but it acknowledges that somehow I have to tell it what type of roll-up it should achieve. So again, as we discussed earlier, typically when you set up a KPI with an actual value of roll-up, you're probably usually going to be setting things like red flag and goal as roll-up as well. Again, not necessarily required, but in this case, it's appropriate. And then beneath these, you do have several selections about what you might do if you don't have any values. If you're missing values for anything, you can treat them as blank, you can set them to be 0, you can treat them as just NA, non-applicable, or any missing equation makes the entire equation blank. In our case, what's appropriate for us here for training purposes today, because we're not going to have time to necessarily populate this new discount card number of cards sold across the entire whole scorecard, you know, throughout the whole sales organization, we'll use treat missing values as blank. Now, with regard to how we're going to roll these values up as we go up the tree hierarchy, the roll-up aggregation type, our choices are sum or average or geometric mean. In our case, we want to sum them. So as we go from the Northwest, you know, region to the West division up to the U.S., you know, market, we want to sum up these number of cards sold as we navigate up the organization tree structure hierarchy. But when I'm looking at this number of cards sold, when I'm looking at the month level, great, it's fine to sum it. But as I choose to potentially move from, you know, a monthly perspective, let's save the changes, from a monthly perspective to, let's say, a quarterly perspective or a yearly perspective, I would like for them to roll up and do an average, okay? Somehow, folks, I don't know how this just, oh, it's a new KPI. There we go. Number of cards sold. Bear with me. I accidentally navigated away from number of cards sold. So as we proceed here, I want to make sure that this is set up appropriately. So I want average for manual aggregation type. For roll-up aggregation type, I want it to be sum. And then we've got actual, red flag, and goal all set up for roll-up on this brand new number of cards sold KPI. And that is set up now appropriately, and we'll click Save. Okay, so what does that mean? What's the implications of this, having added a new generic item called discount card sales and a new KPI, number of cards sold, in our sales template? Well, let's go take a look. So if we go to Africa, for instance, and open Africa and take a look at its scorecard, note that automatically the discount card sales generic item and the number of cards sold KPI exists. It's there. Similarly, if we navigate to Europe as a template copy, again, we'll see the existence, again, of that discount card sales, again, for Europe, and number of cards sold for Europe. And here's the big, if you will, however. If we go to Europe as a copy, again, we talked earlier that when that copy was made, it became disassociated with the underlying template from which it was created. And if I open up Europe as a copy, you see that we do not have that newly created discount cards area or generic item, and we don't have the number of cards sold. So right there is sort of the, if you will, the proof in the pudding of the difference between the use of copy versus copy as template. Okay, so hopefully that is clear, makes sense to everyone out there. And that, again, is really the focus there. My intended focus was to talk about the difference between the copy versus copy as template, and along the way cover the idea of roll-up aggregation. So again, all of these organizations that were built against that template are going to reflect the discount card sales. So in this case, Southwest, the Southwest, U.S. area that rolls up to the West Coast, that rolls up to U.S. and all the way up to sales. They all are going to reflect the existence of the discount card sales and the number of cards sold. So let's see what happens if we actually populate one of these scorecards and those discount cards, number of cards sold area, and just see what happens in terms of the roll-up, the desired roll-up throughout our U.S. organizational tree structure. So we'll start in the West Coast. I'll go to the Southwest area, I guess I'll call it. We'll go to the discount card sales, generic item, open the number of cards sold, and we want to populate this with some values. Now we're looking, of course, right now at September 2018. Oh, I forgot to provide red flag and goal values. Oh, folks, sorry. I got to slow down. Here's the deal, folks. Back in the sales template, I neglected when setting up the discount card sales, I neglected in the number of cards sold to provide the goal and red flag values. Oh boy. So I set it up with a red flag, told it to treat missing values as blank, but then I didn't provide any default values. So I need to provide for the red flag 100 and the goal of 200. My apologies for forgetting that. Anyone watching probably noticed that I forgot to do that. But it is important to have that set up in terms of being able to score and reflect performance accurately within our various organizations and scorecards. So now that KPI is, I believe, set up appropriately, and let's give it a shot here. Let's jump back to the Southwest U.S. region and the discount card sales and the number of cards sold. Okay, so good. So here it is reflecting that the red flag value is 100, the goal is 200. And what we want to do is provide some values, for this Southwest U.S. region. And I'm going to do it for 3 months at a time. So I'm going to change my calendar period from monthly to quarterly. And then I'll edit which gives me the opportunity to quickly and easily put in some values for July of 90. Let's say that August is also 90, but then in September, we really knocked it out of the park and sold 300. So 90, 90, and 300 for the Southwest. And then let's do a similar thing here for the Northwest. Select it, go to the discount card sales, number of cards sold, and again, edit and provide some scores. This time we'll sort of reverse the idea and say that at first they did great at 300, and then in August they only did 90, and in September they actually even did worse at 70. Okay, and we'll click save. Okay, so we do have some scores. They're not being yet visually presented because it's just taking some time to do a little recalculating, but if we reopen here, the Southwest, you see that we now have visual indication of performance for our discount card sales, number of cards sold. It is reflecting performance in the various months, and for the third quarter, giving me an overview perspective of 160, okay? And this is kind of important about the 160. If I change this to monthly, so remember this KPI we've set up to be updated, if you will, monthly. So for the month of September, we have an actual value of 300. And if we look at the quarter, again, and show results for this one, we have values of 90, 90, and 300, right? But what about if we go up at this point to the West Coast level of our tree structure and see what kind of reflection we have up here? So I'll select the West Coast, and you know that we didn't put any values in at the West Coast level where we do have number of cards sold. And what we have here is for the number of cards sold for the West Coast, if we look at the actual value, note that it is coming from an equation, which is the sum. Remember, we set up the roll-up aggregation type. As you roll up the tree hierarchy, this was set up as sum. Thus, we're seeing 390, which is adding the 300 plus the 90. We have 180, which is adding the 90 and the 90. And we have 370, which must be summing 370, is what it's, of course, doing. So in terms of that performance, it is actually rolling up and summing appropriately. But notice that in terms of presentation at this West Coast level, what I'm seeing here is a number of 313. Well, where does 313 come from? It's the average of all of these actual 390 plus 180 plus 370 divided by 3, right? So that is because we set that manual aggregation property to be average versus sum. If we had set it as sum, it would verbatim be adding 390 plus 180 plus 370 and showing me that value here. And similarly, the same idea rolls all the way up this, if you will, again, hierarchical tree structure. If I go up to the US organization, again, I see the number of cards sold here. And again, it's just bringing up the West region value because that's all it has. It doesn't have any East Coast values at this point. But this is working appropriately as I aggregate up and down. And also it's similarly doing the right thing if I choose to say, well, let's view this monthly. Okay, so in this case, it is just adding the numbers, right? It's adding all the numbers together because that's what it was told to do at the monthly level. Okay, so again, hopefully that, again, makes sense to everybody. Kind of wish I could take a show of hands or look at faces to see either smiles or frowns as to whether that concept, again, of roll-up aggregations and the application of it all the way from a sales template, right, where you actually set this all up appropriately on the number of cards sold down here and edit this and give it all the appropriate properties, right? Now, that basically covers an introduction, visual introduction and demonstration of template copy versus standard copy, as well as the use of roll-up aggregations. So let's jump back here into my PowerPoint presentation and forge ahead with today's agenda. The last couple items here, folks, shouldn't take real long. They're not overly complex, but just the concept of expanding on an organization that has been created via copy as template and considerations in using the copy as template option. And I don't want to say limitations, but so I use the term considerations in terms of using copy as template and what you can do with those going forward. So first of all, in terms of expanding on an organization that has been created as copy or via copy as template. Here, I'm just showing you a screen capture of our sort of parent level sales organization and the scorecard of sales and the generic items that exist within it. And you'll see the ones that were there originally, the value of sales, the number of sales, and down at the bottom, the discount card sales that we just created and worked with. But you also see in here a sales pipeline, generic item, and two underlying measures that, of course, are not coming from the original template. And the point of this is that if you have created a copy as template organization, you are not limited, you're not locked into what that original template provides. It gives you a great jumping off or starting point. It empowers that changes made to the original template will carry forth to any and all children of the original template, but any of those children are editable to the extent of growing it, adding additional items into the new, if you will, child scorecard within a child organization, right? So that's really important that you understand that you can expand a newly created copy as template organization. In terms of editing a child organization, that's where it's quite a bit more limiting, if you will. So in this case, I'm focusing on our organization of Africa, its sales scorecard, and again, that newly created number of cards sold KPI. And if you click edit on it, if you look over to the right, you'll see a very limited, if you will, screen. And it does indicate to you very overtly that this KPI is based on a template. Most settings will be coming from the template, but you can override some of them. So in the drop down here for KPI settings, your choices are to use the template or to override the template. If you select override template, you know, sometimes people expect that what they'll be able to do is get into a wholesale redefinition of the KPI and be able to make all kinds of property changes to that KPI. But again, most of the settings are coming from the template. And you see here what you are able to change. There appear to be a lot of things here on the screen. Most of them are grayed out. I don't know how well that's coming across in this webinar presentation, but manual aggregation type is actually grayed out. Actual value and the setting of rollup and rollup and rollup for red flag and goal are also grayed out. What you can change is how you address missing values, and you can adjust the red flag and goal default values for this particular KPI that came from the underlying template. And right there, you know, I've highlighted 100. That is something that is really kind of pertinent and comes into play often, where if you set up the original KPI with certain thresholds, you know, a goal and a red flag, but that goal and red flag aren't really realistic in different, let's say, regions of the world, then you can make changes to those at those different KPIs, even though they come from an underlying base template. So that's at the KPI level, what types of, if you will, editing capabilities you have. At the generic item level and or the scorecard item, it's really even more limited in terms of what you can change. And again, it does overtly indicate that this generic item, based on a template, settings will come from the template. You can override some of them, but really the only thing you can override is by clicking on advanced options, and then in the advanced options saying override the template, and the only thing that you can override is the start and archive dates. That's it. So you can change when the start and when the archive is for that particular KPI, again, within that particular organization. But you can't make wholesale fundamental changes, you know, to this, in this case, generic item just beyond the start and archive dates. So real quick, let's just, you know, just give you a sense of just showing you that live just very quickly. So again, you know that, and it really doesn't matter where I go. So right now I'm looking at a sales template. Let's jump into that newly created Europe as a template copy and just use it to show you that in here, if within Europe, we would like to expand our sales scorecard to, again, include, you know, a new generic item, like we'll just go with the example of, again, sales pipeline, right? I can easily create sales pipeline as a new generic item. And then within the sales pipeline, I can add some new KPIs. And in this case, I'll just set them up. Whoops, sorry, I'm going to make it even faster and easier by setting them up as a linked item. And what we'll do is just jump into, in this case, marketing and increase lead generation. And from there, again, it's all about sales pipeline. So we care about ad clicks, for instance. And then one more linked item. How about we care about within marketing, bear with me. Within marketing, we also care about, under increased lead generations, we care about leads. That kind of makes sense. And click create. Okay, so I've added, in this case, you know, a new generic item and a couple of underlying measures without having really any impact on the upper or already existing generic items which came from the scorecard, but I can expand on my sales, you know, Europe scorecard at will, in terms of, again, it's all about expansion or growth. However, if I went to the discount card sales and said, you know, I need to make a change here in Europe, it's a new market, you know, we want to be reasonable about how many, you know, cards we're expecting to sell within our first couple months, I can go to the Kpi settings, and instead of just leaving it as use template, I can override the template. And again, down here towards the bottom, as we showed in the screen capture, maybe I, you know, reduce the red flag down to 50. And for Europe, you know, the goal temporarily will just be 100. So that's the type of change that you, again, you can make within a copy as template version of a KPI. But again, I'm limited to, that's it in terms of changes that I can make. If I need to make more wholesale, like what type of aggregation is occurring or how things should roll up the tree, then I, of course, would need to go back to the original sales template organization and find that original KPI, number of cards sold, and edit it, which in turn will be reflected in all instances of that particular KPI that has been copied as template to other organizations. Okay, again, hopefully that is clear and makes sense to everybody. That brings us pretty much to the end, folks. Just a quick review of our agenda. We gave you an introduction to copy as template versus copy, an introduction to the Rollup aggregation properties, of course, the demonstration of the creation of copy as template and Rollup settings at work, and then just our brief discussion on the idea of expanding on a copy as template and considerations or somewhat limitations in terms of using the copy as template organizations once you try and make changes further down the road. Okay, before we let you go, I'd like to just invite you to please join us again in November for our next webinar. We haven't yet determined the topic of that webinar, and we'd like to turn that decision over to you. That topic will be to be determined with your input. Here at the end of this webinar, when it ends, before you physically leave the screen, look for a quick survey with one simple question and a couple of option choices for what you would like us to cover in November's free educational webinar. With that, let me just wrap up by thanking you for attending today. And again, let me invite you to contact me personally. Again, I'm Tom Keating at Spider Strategies. You can go straight to my personal email address, tom.keating@spiderstrategies.com, or you can use our education department email at learn@spiderstrategies.com. I hope to hear from you. And again, appreciate your time and attendance today. And I wish you a great rest of your day.